Welcome from Dubai. This is the Sovereign CEO podcast. And I am Caleb Jones. And today we're going to discuss a very interesting topic that I have never discussed head on before, even though I get many questions about this. And it's interesting how sometimes I will make a comment, just a side comment about something I'm doing. And maybe I'll make it once or twice, but maybe like once or twice a year. And a bunch of guys will latch onto it and find it very interesting and ask me a bunch of questions about it. And so that is that I have mentioned in the past before that I may have to violate my own business model in order to accomplish the goals that I have. So let me make that more clear. I teach, as many of you know, a business model called the Alpha 2.0 business model. I have an entire Sovereign CEO podcast and an Alpha 2.0 podcast on exactly what that model entails. You should go back to the archive of this podcast and look. You should listen to that podcast. There's about 8 or 9 different requirements that an Alpha 2.0 business must have. Basically, that means it is a business that is 100% location independent, that you own 100% of with no partners, that makes at least $85,000 a year US, and that is pre-tax net profit for you per year, that you have no employees, you have a team of people, you have people you work with, but you pay them as vendors or contractors or interns or things like that. And it is not paperwork intensive and a few other requirements. And so I have mentioned in the past that I may have to, in order to hit the income goals that I have, and I have relatively large income goals, at least as compared to most people. In the people that I hang out with, they are actually moderate to low income goals. But to know most human beings, if I were to quote my income goals to you, you'd be like, whoa, you need all that money? What are you going to do with all that money? You don't need that much money. So anyway, my income goals are pretty significant. And I'm making good progress on them. I should be there before I hit age 54, which is my objective. And I have mentioned that I may have to violate the model that I teach in order to reach those goals. Well, what do I mean by that? Because a lot of you have said, well, wait a minute, when would you do that? Because that's kind of interesting. Maybe I'm looking at doing that, or maybe I want to hit these big numbers, or maybe I should plan on when I have to violate the model. And so I'm going to go through a few things this podcast on what I mean by that, and how it may or may not apply to you. And that's the first thing. That's the main thing behind this, is that if you don't have these gigantic income goals that I have, if you don't have income goals that are, high 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures income in terms of income, you don't want to mess with this stuff. Please focus on and follow the Alpha 2.0 business parameters I have given you, because these will make you happy long-term. That's why I designed them. So you don't want to mess with the model. So here, it kind of goes back to an old saying. Once you master something, you can break some of the rules, or you can bend some of the rules. I talk about that in some of my dating and relationship management stuff I talk about on my other channel. When you master something, when you're so good at it, you've been doing it for years, you do it in your sleep, then you can bend a few rules and it's okay. But if you're a beginner or intermediate, if you're in the process of mastering these concepts, you don't want to mess with it. Okay, just do it. But that being said, enough of you have asked this question, so I'll discuss it. Let's come up with a few baseline rules. So first of all, the biggest requirement, or one of the biggest requirements of the Alpha 2.0 business model I teach here at Sovereign CEO, is that you have location independent income, 100%. I will never violate that, and I don't think you should either. That is a core part of your long-term freedom. And as the Western world continues to collapse, which it will in our lifetimes, you want to be mobile. I have talked about that 10,000 times, both on these podcasts, in my videos, my blogs, what have you. So I will never, ever compromise on that. Now, to be clear on that, because I've had some of you ask questions about this, that doesn't mean that I never have any need to travel to fulfill my business obligations. So for example, in my consulting practice, it's all location-independent consulting. But are there times I have flown out to various countries or locations where my clients are and worked with them directly? Yes, I've done that. But it wasn't mandatory that I did that. Didn't have to do it. And I did it kind of when I wanted to. So if travel is involved in what you're doing, that's okay, as long as you have a lot of control over it. Now, if you get a client, let's say you're a consultant, you get a client who says, all right, I'm going to hire you. You need to fly out to my city and need to plant yourself here for, 2 months to work on this project because I need you in person. And you agree to that, you've just violated that Alpha 2.0 model, and I would never do that. That's a terrible, 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 terrible idea because that is location dependent. That's the whole point. But that doesn't mean you can't have meetings or various events or isolated moments where you have to travel to do certain things. That's okay. So I will continue to do that. As a matter of fact, as of the recording of this podcast, we're going to do a team meeting for my business, my Sovereign CEO company, for the team in Las Vegas. So I'll be traveling to Las Vegas. But I was going to go to Las Vegas anyway for various other reasons. Okay. So it's not like I have to fly to Las Vegas. So I have to go to this meeting and I have to do this when I wasn't feeling like it. I just kind of mix it with my other travel stuff. That's another beauty, by the way, of location dependent lifestyles. You can kind of manage, well, I'll be over here, but while I'm here, I'll do this. It's great. I do this a lot because I travel the world. Now let's talk about another requirement that you may or may not violate. What about the $85,000 a year location independent minimum income? You could certainly violate that model by making less than that. I would not do that and I would never do that. And I make many, many multiples of that. So I'm way past that income range these days. But I would never say to you, oh no, go ahead and make less money unless, and I've mentioned this before, you are going to move to a very inexpensive part of the world. You're going to move to like certain parts of Africa, Chiang Mai in Thailand, certain parts of even places like Paraguay or certain areas in South America that are much, 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 much less expensive to live. And you're going to live there for the rest of your life, and you're never going to get married and never have kids. Okay, all these ifs. Fine, you're going to do that, and you're never going to move back to the United States or UK or Australia, where the hell you came from. You're going to stay there for the rest of your life. Okay, then yes, you could make the argument you may not need $85,000 a year U.S. net profit. You could make that argument, sure. But that's a lot of ifs. So I wouldn't mess with that too much. What am I talking about when I say I have to violate my own model? Well, basically two pieces to this. Number one is a requirement of the Alpha 2.0 business model is that you own 100% of your own business, 100% of your own corporation. You do not take on partners. You do not take on investors. Now, that being said, you can do joint ventures, and I do those all the time. Those are great. Do those. Those are great. But people I do joint ventures with don't own any of my corporations. I own all my corporations 100% with one exception. I'll get to it in a second. So you can certainly do that. You can also have what they call strategic partnerships. So those of you know Billy in my business, Billy has a company called Boss Cooperative. And she owns that company with someone else. I don't own even 1% of that business. She doesn't own any of my business. But we have what I would call a strategic alliance where we have exclusive or semi-exclusive contracts for each other. And we both make money on each other. It's great. I'm talking about actual human beings owning a percentage of your business. Never, ever, 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 ever do this. Are there scenarios where you can make a lot of money by bringing on partners? Yes, there are scenarios. But for every one of those successful scenarios, I can give you 20 horror stories. I mean, the odds are literally about that, 1 in 20. I wouldn't do it. Now, am I going to have to violate that part of my model? Yes. So does that mean I'm going to sell half my Sovereign CEO or Alpha 2.0 business to someone else? No, I'm going to keep those. I have another business that I do not talk about publicly. It's in the healthcare sector, where I am required, in order to make the business work, to give up, I would say 30-ish 5% of the corporation or the holding company because of what I need to do in that business. I'm not going to give you specific examples. If you have been to any of my live events, my live seminars, I've gone through exactly what I'm doing. I'm not going to talk about that publicly for various reasons, legal reasons, branding reasons, and a whole bunch of other reasons. So in that business, yes, I have violated my own model. But even in that model, I'm retaining anywhere from 60 to 70% ownership of that company. So that is most of the company. So guess who has final say in things? I do. But I am still giving up a percentage of that money. Now, and I'm not doing that because I like it. I'm doing it because the business model that I'm engaging in that company requires that kind of structure. Okay. Now, also in my defense, that's one of 3 companies I own. It's not my only source of income. And matter of fact, I say this in my primary book, The Unchained Man, where I talk about these Alpha 2.0 requirements. I say you should own 100% of any business that is your primary income source. This company I'm discussing at the moment is not my primary income source. Now, it may be down the road, but right now it isn't. So even then, I'm not quite violating it. I'm sort of violating it. But I'm violating it knowing exactly what I'm doing with it, if that makes sense. Another aspect where I may have to violate my own business model, and hopefully I don't have to do this. And so far, I have not had to do this. I thought I would have to do this about a year or two ago, and I didn't have to, which made me happy. but that is of not taking on any employees. So I teach a no employee business model. Never, ever, 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 ever hire employees in your business. Use subcontractors, use virtual assistants, use them. When you hire employees, you are inviting your big collapsing Western government to come into your business and have them tell you how to run your business. They will tell you when to hire these people, when to fire these people, how to fire these people, how much money to give these people, pay these people, how much money to give them in terms of benefits, and a bunch of other bullshit that you don't want some government bureaucrat telling you what to do. Some government bureaucrat, by the way, who has never started his own business in his entire fucking life, is going to come in and tell you how to run your business when you hire actual employees. And this is true in every Western country. Matter of fact, some Western countries are even worse than others. France is a fucking nightmare. You own a business in France and hire employees? Boy, I'm glad I'm not you. Don't do that. Now, is it possible going forward that I may have to violate that in one of my companies, or hopefully not more than one of my companies, and actually hire an actual employee, a W-2 salaried or hourly employee? It's possible. It's possible. I am pushing very hard against that with all of my might. And so far, I have been successful in pushing against that, and it has not hurt my growth. But I can foresee a time in the next few years, if not maybe in the next year. I hope this isn't true. But I foresee, I can see a possibility where I may have to do this because the business requires it for various reasons I can't get into publicly. So it's possible that one of my companies or two of my companies, hopefully just one, may have to actually hire a real salaried employee. I don't want to, and I have a lot of buddies who own businesses like mine where they have employees, and all I hear about are headaches from these guys. All they do is bitch and moan, some of whom I could mention their names and you'd know their names. Oh, these fucking employees, and I got this problem and that problem, this HR, and I have to have an HR department, and shoot me in the goddamn head. No, I don't want these problems. But, if there is no other way I can see to hit the income goals that I want by the time frame in which I want them, I may be forced to do this. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. This is one of those things I really don't want to violate. I don't mind too much violating the 100% rule in one of my companies. That's not too bad. But hiring an employee would really upset me. But again, I'll do it if I have to. And again, it would be easier if I didn't have these big income goals. If I was happy with the money I made today, I would never have to hire someone ever again. At least, in terms of an expanded rule. Now, I have talked about this. Some of you have asked about this. I have made this statement in the past that the Alpha 2.0 business model will get you to approximately $1.5 million per year in income. And once you hit about 1.5 million and you want to go past 1.5 million, you may have to start building real corporate infrastructure, meaning you maybe not, have to hire salaried employees. You may have to give up some ownership of your business to your management team or to investors or what have you. You might have to do those things. And I can't give you a solid 1.5. That is a generic figure because it really depends on the nature of the business, what you're selling, what niche you're in, how you've structured your business, what your income goals are. A whole slew of variables and factors fall into that. So when I say 1.5 million, that's just kind of an estimate. And I learned this actually from one of my mentors, Dan Kennedy. He said $1 million. And he was probably correct when he said it, but these days it's more like 1.5 million. It could even be a little beyond that, maybe 2 million. You could certainly find people who make 7-figure incomes who have no employees. Hint, hint. You could certainly find those guys. But if you want to go beyond that, again, it's all about how much money do you want to make. Yes, you may have to violate some aspects of that model. And also things like infrastructure. So I teach a low infrastructure business model. My entire business empire is run by my laptop, which is sitting right over there. My laptop, and I have 2 phones. That's it. That's all I've got. I have a microphone here, and I have a DSLR camera I'm recording this video on. But I don't need those things every day, right? And I could use much lower tech equipment than this to get my message across. Not a big deal. But that's it. And so, but yes, when you go well over 1.5 billion, depending on the business, you may have to invest in some more infrastructure. Now, if you're smart, you'll invest in virtual infrastructure, like virtual software, things like Basecamp, which is something that we use in our business, in our Sovereign CEO company. And we're now we actually have 2 Basecamps. We have a Basecamp for our team, and I had to expand to a second Basecamp for our clients. Kind of cool for people who are in the 90-day business builder and the 500K business accelerator. They have their own access lifetime access to our base camp where they can manage all their stuff in there. So that kind of infrastructure I've certainly increased. So as long as it's virtual infrastructure, I have no problem with it. Hopefully I'll never get to the point where I have to invest in real infrastructure. I mean, I would be horrified if someday I had to actually go down and rent real office space with cubicles in some city somewhere in the world and put employees in there. Oh my God. I could mention people's names who do this, who are on the internet, who are big name figures, who bitch about this all the time. I won't, because I don't like doing that, but it's a fucking nightmare. And I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. And hopefully I won't have to. But is it possible I may have to do something like that down the road? I mean, it's possible. Unlikely, but it's possible. My hope is that I can hit the income goals I have before I turn age 54. I am 50 and a half, so I have, 3.5 years in this. By the next 3.5 years, I can hit the income goals I want, the net worth goals that I have, hit those all, get those in place without having to invest in this kind of infrastructure. And that's the bottom line here. That's probably the bottom line message of this podcast is just because you may have to violate these models at higher income levels doesn't mean you do it. You fight. You fight tooth and nail like I'm fighting to not violate these models. You see how much I have fought throughout this podcast of not violating these models? Because I don't want to, because I know what happens when you violate these models. I worked in over hundreds of companies as a business consultant. I've talked to hundreds of business owners about this. Infrastructure is a nightmare. Employees are a nightmare. Having other people own a percentage of your company is a fucking nightmare in most cases. These things are nightmares. You don't want to do these things unless you absolutely have to. So that's the bottom line. It's just because you can doesn't mean you say, oh, good. I don't want you thinking this. Oh, good. When I get to 1.5 million, I can finally hire employees like I've always wanted to do. No. Are you fucking insane? Don't. No. I'm not giving you permission to do these things. I'm just saying there might be weird scenarios at the much higher income levels where you may have to do these things. That's all. And that's really it. Now, if you have more questions on this, you want to get into more specifics on this, let me know, and I can certainly cover this in future podcasts. And I will see you in next week's Sovereign CEO podcast next week. Have fun. Bye.